Hello, today I'll be talking about my top 10 favorite metal albums of 1993. Many albums to choose from. I ultimately decided on these 10 here. But yeah, this will be in no particular order, but yeah, let's go ahead and dive into this, starting off with one of the big four, Anthrax with Sound of White Noise. And this would be the first album with John Bush, and easily my favorite of the John Bush era. I mean, a lot of great songs on here. You do have one of the classics, that song, of course, being Only. But you have other really great songs on here, like Room for One More, which is one of the bigger songs on the album. Potter's Field, maybe one of my favorite album openers from the band. I really like that song. High Pro Glow is also really catchy. Yeah, I do have the ballad on here, Black Lodge, which not one of my favorites on here, but I do like it though. But another thing with this album is that I feel like it has some pretty good deep cuts, like Sodium Pentanol, which is of course track number 9, Burst, Package Rebellion is a song that's grown on me over time. But yeah, all around another really great album from Anthrax, and again easily my favorite from the John Bush era. It continues the dark, heavy sound of Persistence of Time, and yeah, again, pretty good album. And now we're moving to some death metal with Death, Individual Thought Patterns. Probably my favorite Death album, and when you ask people or fans their favorite Death album, you do get a variety of answers. Some people might go with Symbolic, or Human, or maybe Leprosy, but yeah, for me, I have to go with this album. Might not have the best production out of all their albums. I might point to Human when it comes to that argument, maybe, but still, at the end of the day, this has to be my favorite Death album. So many great songs. You do have one of their biggest songs on here, The Philosopher, which is the album closer. Definitely one of their best songs. But you also have, in my opinion, one of their best album openers too, Overactive Imagination. I mean, that song, absolutely love the riffs in that song especially. But then you have the song Mentally Blind, track number 6, and that has to be a top 10 Death song for me. I mean, the guitar work from Chuck in that song, really the musicianship in that song in general. I really like what they're doing in the middle section too, especially. Mentally Blind, definitely all around a really great song. And Human Form and Trapped in the Corner are some of my other favorites on the album. But yeah, you really can't go wrong with really any of the songs on here. If I had to choose what the weakest song is, I'd go with Out of Touch, but that's not really saying much because I do think that's actually a fairly decent song. But yeah, definitely one of Death's best. And now I'll be moving to Fight with War of Words, a band that Rob Halford did in the 90s. They did 2 albums, this one and A Small Deadly Space. I think this is definitely the better of the two, but A Small Deadly Space I think is a decent album, but this one is definitely better, I'd say. Some of my favorites on here, Into the Pit, Nailed to the Gun, Life in Black has to be one of my personal favorites. Not talked about as much as some of the other songs on the album, but I do really like that song, especially the guitar work. You also have Immortal Sin, one of the more well-known songs on the album. I really like that one. Little Crazy, another highlight off the album for me. But yeah, Rob Halford's No Surprise also sounds really great on this album. If you like what he did on Painkiller, then you'll definitely enjoy what he does vocally on this album. But yeah, all around, really great album. But now we're moving to one of the more smaller known bands in this video, but you have Life of Agony with River Runs Red. Often considered their best, and for good reason. It is their debut album and part of the New York hardcore thing, part of that scene in the early to mid 90s or so. Really great album. Some of my favorites this time, Through and Through, and that was the song that got me hooked into the band. I really like the dark, groovy guitar, and This Time, and along with, of course, Keith's vocals in that song. Of course, he was known as Keith before he would go ahead and move to Mina later in the discography. But yeah, This Time, again, definitely a really great song. Underground's also pretty good. I do like the title track. A bit on the more shorter side, but I do really like that song though. Probably one of my favorites. Bad Seed for me probably has some of my favorite guitar work on the album. I really dig the guitar work, especially in the verses. My Eyes, one of the more upbeat, faster songs on the album. I really like that song. The Stain Remains, for me, one of their most underrated songs. I really like that song a lot. Method Groove is also really catchy. All around a really great album. And maybe one of the most underrated concept albums too. Yeah, all around a really great album. Definitely can't recommend this album enough. If you haven't heard it, definitely check it out. Especially if you like metal concept albums. I wouldn't really compare it to something like Seventh Son or Operation Mindcrime. I wouldn't compare it to something like that, but still, again, if you like concept albums and you like metal, I'd say at least give this a chance. Definitely give it a listen. Then now we're moving back to death metal with Morbid Angel, with Covenant. When it comes to favorite Morbid Angel albums, people usually point to either Altars of Madness or this album. I have to go with this one. Altars of Madness would be, of course, second place, but this album is definitely really awesome. Definitely a death metal classic. And commercially, maybe their biggest album. I mean, it's thanks to the song, of course, God of Emptiness, which is the album closer. Definitely one of their best songs. Same with the album opener, too. Rapture. I mean, definitely through and through, definitely a banger. You also have Angel of Disease, another favorite of mine off the album, and also probably one of my favorite Morbid Angel songs. And I also enjoy The Lion's Den. I really like that song a lot, but yeah, all around, another really great album. And easily one of the band's best. But now we're moving to Overkill with I Hear Black. Kind of an underrated album for them, and also one of their more different sounding albums. This album utilizes a bit more groove, but it also kind of has a darkness to it within its overall sound or atmosphere. You do have some faster songs on here, like Dreaming in Columbia and Weight of the World. Those are also really great songs. You do have your more groovy moments like I Hear Black and Ignorance and Innocence. But some of my favorites on here are definitely Dreaming in Columbia, the title track. I do like Feed My Head, a bit more slower, a bit more groovy, but I really like that one. And then you have probably the biggest song on here, Spiritual Void, definitely one of my favorites on the album, maybe one of my favorite Overkill songs. Some of the riffs kind of remind me of Sabbath a little bit. I really like that song a lot. You do have Shades of Grey, which is a bit more on the slower side of things, but I do like that song. Probably not one of my favorites on the album, but I do like it though. But yeah, I really dig this album from Overkill. Kind of underrated. Not their best, but still, again, underrated. Definitely give it a listen if you haven't heard it in a while, or if you haven't heard it, period. And now we're moving to the album that's playing in the background right now, and that is Chaos AD by Sepultura. Yeah, I mean, definitely one of the band's best. At first, when I was getting into Sepultura, this album was actually my favorite, but nowadays, this album and Beneath the Remains kind of fight for being my second favorite, but Arise has to be at the top for me. I absolutely love that album, but this album is also really great. This album sees the band going in a more groove metal direction. Of course, you do have your faster moments on here too, but again, they're starting to leave thrash behind more with this album. But, I mean, some of the bigger songs on here still hold up all these years later. Refuse, Resist, Territory, Slave in the World. I do like Biotech is Godzilla. But I think you get some pretty good deep cuts in here, or lesser known songs like Nomad and Amen. I think Clenched Fist is maybe one of my favorite album closers from the band. I really like Clenched Fist. But yeah, The Hunt is also pretty cool too. I mean, all around, really great album from Sepultura. Definitely one of the band's best. And now I'll be moving to Undertow by Tool. And honestly, nowadays it's kind of tough for me to pick a favorite Tool album. For the longest time, I would go with, I think when I was getting into Tool, I think Anima was my favorite for the longest time. But then it went to Lateralis. But nowadays, honestly, this album, Anima and Lateralis, kind of fight for being my favorites. Which is, I mean, when three albums are fighting for number one, that's not really a common thing I could say about many bands, but it happens for me with Tool. But yeah, this album, definitely a really great debut album. Maybe not as proggy or as technical as some of their later albums, but still definitely really like this album, and its raw, heavy sound too. I mean, Intolerance, definitely really great way to open up the album. The bigger songs on the album, Prison, Sex, and Sober, I think still hold up all these years later. I still really like those songs, especially Prison Sex, which probably is a top 10 Tool song for me, maybe top 5. I really like that song a lot. But I really dig the heavy guitar and bottom. But you also have the song Flood, which is on the more longer side, but I think it's maybe one of their most underrated songs. I really like that song a lot, especially Maynard's vocals in that song especially. 4 Degrees is another song that's always been one of my personal favorites on the album. Swamp Song is also pretty cool too. Yeah, all around, pretty good album from Tool. And maybe one of the best debut albums of the 90s. Then I'll be moving to some goth metal with Type O Negative, Bloody Kisses. And when it comes to favorite Type O Negative albums, people usually pick either this one or October Rust. October Rust would probably be my second favorite, but this one would probably be at the top for me. I really like this album a lot. So many great songs. Of course, you do have some of their biggest songs on here, like Christian Woman and Black Number One, which were, of course, the songs that got me into the band, along with Love to Death and some others. But I do like the cover of Summer Breeze. I think I've heard the original, but I can't remember. That might be something I'd have to listen to again. But either way, I do like their cover of that song. Set Me on Fire is pretty good. I do like Kenny's vocals in this album too. I do like his backing vocals. But of course, Peter Steele, rest in peace. He definitely sounds great to no surprise on this album. I do like his deep, dark voice. Definitely a voice. His vocals are not going to be for everybody, but I do like them though. Definitely unique for sure. Too Late Frozen, another favorite of mine on the album. Blood and Fire is a song that's usually always been one of my least favorites on the album, but it's a song that's actually grown on me over time, and I definitely like it much more now compared to when I first was getting into Type O Negative. But yeah, all around, really great album. Definitely had to make my list. Maybe it would crack the top 5 of 1993 for me. And now to the final album for this video, we got The Outer Limits by Voivod. I really like this album a lot. This is probably one of my favorite Voivod albums. This would probably be second for me. Nothing Face would be at the top, but this would be second. One of their more straightforward albums. This album and Anthrax seem to be often considered their more radio-friendly leaning albums, or one of their more simple albums, however you want to put it. But either way, really like this album. Some of my favorite Voivod songs are on here, like Moonbeam Rider and The Lost Machine. I really like Moonbeam Rider especially, but Lost Machine, musically I really like what they're doing in that song. You do have one of the band's epics, Jack Luminous. That's definitely one of my favorites on the album. Time Warp is also pretty cool. I do like their cover of the Nile song, originally by Pink Floyd, and I do like, of course, Pink Floyd's version 2, of course, the original. But I do like Voivod's cover of that song too. Fix My Heart, definitely on the more radio-friendly side of things, but I do really like that song. Maybe one of my favorite album openers from the band. But yeah, all around, really great album from Voivod. Again, definitely one of my favorites from them. But yeah, that is my top 10 favorite metal albums of 1993. Let me know your thoughts on my top 10. Let me know what your top 10 would be in the comment section below. Let me know if some of my albums here that I mentioned would crack your top 10. Let me know some of your favorite or least favorite albums from this year and all the good stuff. But anyways, thanks for watching. Please leave a comment and a like, subscribe. Have a nice day and take care.